Okay, this will be the final video for your energy and resources unit. This is going to be the renewable or alternate forms of energy, and then how efficient energy is. So, energy efficiency is nothing new to you guys. How much are we putting in versus how much are we getting out? You guys remember that a lot of the fuel that we burn or stuff that we use, we're going to lose some as heat to the environment, we're going to use some as waste. It's just not 100% efficient, so we're going to lose some. So the goal is to minimize the amount that we lose, and therefore to increase our efficiency. So it's estimated that 16% of the energy we use actually ends up doing work, the rest is lost. So that's a huge, we need to make that number a lot better. So the way that most people agree on to do that, to increase our efficiency, is to conserve our resources, to live more sustainably, to reduce our dependence on foreign fuels. If we can eliminate transportation, then that's going to be a huge thing. And then to save money, little things: turn the lights off, turn the water off, don't run the fan in that room if you're not in that room, so on and so forth. Okay, so the laws of thermodynamics, and I'm not a math teacher, I'm not a physics teacher, I just want you guys to know the basic concept. First law: energy can't be created or destroyed. We can only convert it from one form to another. So we're not ever losing energy, we're just converting it to different forms. Second law essentially states that the energy quality is always going to decrease. We're always going to lose energy as heat, lose it to the environment, convert it to a different form that we can't use, because it's not ever going to be 100% efficient. We just want to make it as efficient as we possibly can. So 6% of the energy and gas is used to move the car, 5% of the energy and electricity is changes to useful light. So we want to make those numbers much higher if we can. Oh, I went too far. Okay, so this was kind of a cool graphic. It's kind of showing you the flow through the U.S. economy. So we have the non-renewables, we have the renewable nuclear energy, and then we have other renewables, including biomass. So still relatively in the U.S., a very relatively small percentage of renewable energy is being used. So you put that through our economy, our lifestyles, the way that we live, so on and so forth, and the outputs that you get is we're using about 9% of our energy usefully. We have a lot of waste in petrochemicals. This is the unavoidable. This is just the loss of efficiency waste. But look at this. We have 43% of our energy is wasted that we could be using. So this is what we're trying to make smaller. This we want to put up with that 9%. Okay, so to improve the energy efficiency, cogeneration, to combine stuff, is a big thing that's happening right now. So industry uses, if we're using, if a big plant or whatever is using heat from steam generation to produce electricity, they also use it to heat the plant and to heat nearby houses. So kind of combine it and share it rather than just getting rid of what you don't use. And then the CAFE standards was something that was set in motion. So it's essentially saying that the government says that if you're going to use a vehicle sold in the U.S., it has to have a specific mileage requirement. It can't be one of those gas guzzlers, although I don't really know how some cars are on the roads with that requirement anymore. But here's why. Standards hadn't been increased, hadn't been improved on since 1985. They improved them again in 2009. I personally think it should be a lot higher. Why do you need a Hummer? But that's just my opinion. So in any case, the CAFE standards are there and are hypothetically being put to use. Okay. Sustainable energy strategy. So if we are going to use energy more sustainably, we have to improve our efficiency. That's the big concept right now. We want to rely more on renewable energy as a source. We want to shift from the big centralized huge power grids to smaller systems, decentralized micropower, and that's going to be better, right? I don't know if you guys were even aware of this, but a few years ago, pretty much all of New York City lost power for, a couple days. It wasn't terribly long, but it was in the middle of summer, it was really hot, it was huge deal at the time, and they all lost power because it was all on the same grid, and the grid went down, so everybody lost power. So one of the big advantages to using smaller decentralized power would be that wouldn't happen on such a large scale anymore. So converting into wind power, solar power, tidal, biofuels, or hydrogen power are all options. Again, I liked this graph. I think it's missing some information. I would want to see wind power as well. That's a really big source. But I thought this was very interesting. If you're looking, wood fell off the map 50, 60 years ago, right? We don't really use wood as a fuel anymore. But it's showing, coal and oil, we're going to drop off pretty much to nothing, right? Because we're going to use it all up. They anticipate that natural gas will still be in use, but will be decreasing. But look at how hydrogen and solar, essentially the renewable energy sources, are increasing so dramatically. This is the way that it's going. Nuclear is not really going to be super helpful. So I think this is a very telling, and I think it's also very interesting that it's not going to be one source of energy. I think that it's going to be, in my personal opinion, everybody says, oh, well, what do you think is going to be the next energy? And I personally think that it's going to be everything. I think it's going to be depending on where you live, depending on what that area has decided, but I think it's going to be a combination, both in this country and worldwide, of a whole bunch of different energy sources. So, the world use of renewables, we're making slow progress here. The thought is there, let's put it that way. Europe aims to generate 22% of its energy by 2010. I don't think they quite hit that, but they're working on it. Costa Rica does an amazing job. 92% of the energy in Costa Rica is renewable. It's incredibly impressive when you go down there. A lot of their energy is geothermal because they have a lot of volcanic activity in that country. They use a lot of solar power as well. It's really, really impressive. Costa Rica is like the poster child for renewable energy right now. China is way down there. China is really having a tough time still. They have such a high human population. I don't know that they've tried necessarily as hard as they possibly could. They're shooting for about 10% by 2020. In the U.S., California is getting about 12% from wind and plans to increase this to 50% by 2030. Denmark is now 20%, increased it up to 50%. Brazil is 20% from sugarcane, so that'd be like biofuels. And then this is huge up and coming. I mean, if you guys want like a guaranteed job, jump onto the renewable energy bandwagon, because right now we're at 1.7 million jobs. It's going to go through the roof because it just has to change. We talked already that we're running out of the fossil fuels. That's going to be gone probably in your lifetime, maybe in my lifetime. And so you guys and your kids are going to be using other energy sources. It has to happen. So some of the options for that: solar energy. You can either have passive solar energy or active solar energy. Passive just absorbs heat directly from the sun. Active is with some kind of collector. You guys can see these on small scale actually all around here. There's a lot of options for this. For collection systems, the photovoltaic cells are the most popular. They're just those little black cells that convert sunlight to electricity. And it's really easy. You put it out there, you plug it in, you set it up, and you're pretty much done. Very minimal, very low impact, minimal amount of waste and byproducts. So solar energy is, but you have to have a sunny area, right? This wouldn't work necessarily in Alaska when it's dark for days at a time. So this would be more like a passive. You're just using that sun directly to heat stuff. The solar cells, those are some solar cell options. The advantages to solar cells is that you can plug them. They don't have to be connected to an electricity grid. You can plug them in directly to whatever you want to use them for. Okay, and then the passive stuff, orienting the building, changing the way that you build, pumping liquid through rooftop collectors to heat stuff. So all of these options are for passive solar heating, and that's going to absorb and store heat and move it around the system, around the building. Living roofs are really big. Living roofs look better from an aesthetic standpoint. They help to remove carbon dioxide in cities. They can help with energy. You can grow, vegetables and stuff, useful. So living roofs are a huge thing. Rice is really big right now. Rice University is huge right now. They have all kinds of green initiatives. Fascinating to walk around the campus and look at it. I actually took a tour this summer, and they've done an amazing job with green roofs and renewable energy and energy efficiency and all kinds of just small changes that really add up. Wind energy is simply a wind spinning the big blades. Those blades spin a turbine which generates electricity. So again, very basic, very low waste, low emissions, and a huge potential resource. There's so much wind right now that even if we only captured 20% at the world's best energy sites, we could meet the entire energy demand for the entire world. So I honestly see wind energy becoming huge in the near future. So the benefits to wind energy is that it's so renewable, it's so easy, it's so cheap, very simple. You can, a lot of places have like pasture land underneath the turbines so that you can be, using the land for two things. You don't have to just have the wind farms on it. But the downsides, animals sometimes get hit by the turbines, and then people don't like it because it doesn't look pretty. So you can see that pasture stuff down here is becoming very, very big. You can use them individually, or you can connect them to use on a wind farm. So this is a huge, I think it's going to be really big, really fast. Okay, hydropower is water power. So you can do it from the tide, you can do it from waves, you can do it from dams. Very valuable renewable resource. Second cheapest way to generate electricity after the wind. Solar energy is pretty cheap, but you have to set up the whole thing first. So that's why that's a little bit more expensive. The benefits to this, we already have the technology. It's free of pollution. Dams are helpful in that they provide flood control. They provide a lot of electrical power, but long-term environmental is that dams are not really a good plan. They just mess with they mess with the natural water flow. So they're messing with the biodiversity. They're messing with the food chain. Migratory routes for a lot of animals are totally messed up. Limited availability. And then they are helpful with flood control, but you have to have somewhere to put the water. So not as necessarily easy as one would think. Okay. This is a tidal power plant. So if you're using the tide, it's the same kind of concept as a wind farm. The tide's going in, the tide's coming out once or twice a day, depending on where you live in the world, spinning this turbine. That's going to produce your energy. And then the same for waves. So every time a wave hits, rolls this over, spins a turbine, and spins a pump, and gets sucked into and produces your energy. Okay, biomass is energy from plant materials or animal waste. So essentially, like as a fuel. You have some options up here for different types of biomass. Lots and lots of options. This is becoming more and more common. One of the big concepts that people are freaking out about right now is that corn is actually being used more and more as a biofuel, which on the one hand is really good from a fuel standpoint, but from an agriculture standpoint is really bad because now we're putting tons and tons of arable land into growing corn for fuel and not into growing food to feed people when people are starving. So that's the controversy there. So this is about 5% of the energy right now, and this is, again, being very much more common on a small scale. So this is an example using cow dung. Again, you could probably throw like burning peat into this because it's so organic. Geothermal energy is the one that Costa Rica is famous for, and so this is heat stored underground. So like volcanic action, plate tectonic movement, stuff like that. And you can use that, you can gather that to heat and cool buildings to produce electricity, either from steam or from just the heat passing over it, however you decide to collect it. So this is a typical heat pump, and it's just a heat transfer. And then you reverse it, go the other way to cool the house in the summer. Okay, so if you're looking at cars, at transportation, this is where we have, this is our Achilles heel. It's a huge issue right now. A lot of our energy and our fuel goes toward transportation. So hybrids are becoming more and more popular. Electric cars are becoming more and more popular. I saw a fascinating, I don't know that we'll have time for it in class, but an absolutely fascinating documentary, I'll get the name of it for you guys, that talked about why electric cars are not being driven all the time now, and it was essentially, the gas companies kind of hid the technology for a while. It was crazy. We'll talk about it in class. So this is a very, very small percentage right now of car sales in the U.S. If you're looking at alternative fuels, again, you can go back to the biofuels, you can go back to the biogas from algae, and then hydrogen fuel. All of these at this point are very hard to come by, expensive. We need more technology. Even the electric cars, the technology is there. We just need to be able to distribute it better. So I'm hoping that I see huge, I honestly, I'm hoping that the next car I buy is an electric car, because that would be great. But they're just not, they're not easy to use for the normal consumer at this point. So I'm hoping that that changes, that they put more charging stations in, that they make that technology better, that continues to improve, so more people will want to buy it. Hydrogen as a fuel, a lot of people see that as the next big thing to replace oil, but it's very hard to get to. It's very expensive. There's no infrastructure. We don't have the technology or the resources there yet. It's very expensive still, so I think that's farther off if we decide to use it. Fuel cells are being developed, combines hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, no air pollution, carbon dioxide. This is, again, in the works, in the process, really cool. Perhaps in 20 to 30 years you guys will be driving these. And this is what it looks like, and what the prototypes right now look like. Okay, so nuclear energy, and again, remember I said that this is kind of can get thrown with both renewable and non-renewable, depending on how you look at it. So the nuclear energy is the energy that exists inside the nucleus of an atom. Two types of getting the energy. Fission is splitting the cells, and fusion is combining them. Okay, so if we look at the nuclear fission, if we're splitting them apart, every time we divide it up, you get more and more and more energy. So you release those neutrons and get energy. Okay, if it's not controlled, you have big problems. It has to be in a very controlled, manageable environment, controlled space, released slowly. So there's a huge setup cost, there's production costs. It has to be very, very specific in order to make this work. So this is the way that the nuclear plant works, essentially. So you have your reaction happening over here in your reactor vessel, and then that's pumping through here, and they're pumping that into water, so that water is going to turn into steam. The steam is going to go turn a turbine, which is going to produce electricity, and then the water is going to get back down to condense into liquid water again, which will get pumped up again and turn into steam again. So the water is cycling through, and the control rod is cycling through as well. Okay, very rich energy source, lots and lots of energy output. This surprised me, actually. 1 in every 5 houses in the U.S. has some of their electricity from nuclear energy, which is, I think, pretty interesting. So the power plants right now, there's a couple in Texas, a lot of them along the East Coast, especially in New England. The positives for nuclear power, very rich energy source. The reactors would need very little maintenance, very minimal personnel there once it's up and running and situated, but it has to be monitored all the time. No air pollution, so low waste products. But the negatives, it's that it has large radioactive waste. So no air pollution, but huge amounts of radioactive waste we have to figure out what to do with. We don't have any long-term disposal sites right now, so we're kind of shuttling it from place to place. We don't have a good solution for that. So that's why a lot of people are calling it a non-renewable resource, because the waste that it produces, what are we going to do with it? They're very expensive to build. The maintenance is a pain in the neck, and there's a lot of safety concerns with it. Okay, so this is all the nuclear waste. It emits the radiation that can be harmful for thousands of years. They emit that radiation because they're unstable. They'd rather be something else. So they break down slowly, right? And that's called a half-life. It's how long each of these different things take to break down. Every different radioactive element has a specific time that is their half-life. The half-life is the time it takes for half of the atoms to decay and to break down. Half-lives can be anywhere from a fraction of a second to billions of years. The longer the half-life, the less intense the radiation. And it takes about 10 half-lives before an element is harmless. So, if that's happening in a fraction of a second, no big deal, right? But if it's happening over 4.5 billion years, this might be a problem.